Using a camera in manual mode is not that difficult or that complicated and does not require such a long tutorial. So in this video, for that exact reason, I'm going to teach you the concept of shutter speed, aperture and ISO in the next 3 minutes. Let's talk about shutter speed first, and as the name suggests, shutter speed is the speed of the shutter at which it opens and closes back. Now, while the duration it remains open, that is when all of this light or all these things that you can see, these basically reflect light back to your eyes. That is how eyes work, and that is exactly how cameras work as well, kinda. So when the shutter remains open, that is when all of this light enters the sensor and it forms the image that you see in the frame. But the brightness aspect of the picture is not the only thing that shutter affects. So let's say these trees are moving here and there, but you want to capture a sharp image of every single leaf that is in detail. It's not blurred or anything. So if you go for that picture in 1/50 shutter speed, it will be blurred because the longer the shutter remains open, it will also capture motion. And when something is in motion in a picture, it causes blur, which is called motion blur. So in such scenarios, you will have to go for a very fast shutter speed, so everything just captured in an instant. And the sooner you capture things, the more in focus and more sharper they will be. That is how shutter speed works. So let's talk about aperture now, and it's a pretty cool thing actually. Most people when they first get a DSLR, they always go for that that blurred background, that shallow depth that you get. So how do you get that? You can thank aperture for it. So you can't control aperture on most phones, by the way, so just watch out for that, right? The aperture is the amount of opening that you'll get. Now if that doesn't make sense to you, watch this video right here. This thing that you see me twisting, that is the aperture here. So it always remains open, slightly or fully, that is up to you, that is how you set the settings. But yeah, aperture always remains open. Now listen to this part carefully. The lesser the numbers go on the aperture, the wider it opens, which means if I'm going for the aperture 3.2, which means my sensor is open pretty wide. But if I'm going for a aperture like f11 or something, it means my aperture is not really that far open or that wide. And if I'm going for a very tight aperture like f32, it means my aperture is very slightly open, allowing very less light to enter the camera. Now a smaller aperture in numeric values, a smaller aperture, or the wider you open it, the more blur you will get in the background. It is good for portrait photography, or you're really popping out your subject from the background, as you can see in this picture right here. And if I click the same picture, with a very small or a very high in numeric values aperture, now a lot of things will be in focus, but the image is generally very sharp as well. Right, the last thing that we need to talk about now is ISO, and it is by far the easiest thing among these three. ISO in the most basic words is the digital brightness that you get with your camera. Have you ever noticed that slider when you are clicking pictures on your smartphone or taking videos? When you tap on the screen, there is a slider available. If you bring it down, the brightness of the image goes down. If you bring it up, the brightness goes up. That is basically your phone adjusting the ISO. So let's say I have to click a picture of these trees, right? And the image is overall very dark. Sure, I can adjust the shutter speed and the aperture, but I don't want to, because if I change my settings, I'll lose everything. I'll get motion blur, I'll get everything in sharp focus, but I want only that one particular leaf in focus. So in order to avoid that darkness, you can always adjust the ISO, and your ISO goes actually in this camera, it goes from 100 to 10,000. Now, okay, it's more than 10,000, it's a lot, but you necessarily won't ever go above 3,200, and you'll rarely use 3,200 as well. Why? Because when you add brightness digitally to your image, it allows in a lot of grain, and a noisy and a grainy picture is something that nobody likes. Until and unless you're going for that aesthetic and people add it, in post. And that is basically it for this video. That is how you use your camera in manual mode, and that is all about shutter speed, aperture and ISO. And I would really recommend that everything you have learned in this video, just take your cameras out and start experimenting with different settings, so you really have that experience. You know what you like and what you don't like, because photography and beauty is subjective. You will have your own style and you'll eventually grow into it, rather than copying things from the internet, like best settings for this type of scenario. You're not gonna get answers for everything on Google. So yeah, just get out there, shoot everything. I mean, click pictures of everything and just enjoy with your camera, man, because that is all it is about. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you want to. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.